In today's economy, more people than ever are looking to buy and sell businesses. But how do you do it? Welcome to the Deal Board, presented by Transworld Business Advisors. Straight talk about real deals and real people. Listen to stories, interviews, and expert advice to help your business sale, merger, or acquisition process. Now, here are your business exit experts, Andy and Jessica.
Hey, welcome everybody. And we have, I think we have a very interesting show this week. And it's about divorce. And I want to thank my wife for not having any experience in this. But unfortunately, we do have experience when we're selling businesses.
Right. And, I think divorce is a heavy topic, but it does happen. And we do deal with a number of couples that work in business together. And when you add that layer of the couples working in business together through a divorce, there can be additional issues during the deal that you have to tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have some guests today that are going to help walk you through that. And, even when only one spouse is in a business, it certainly creates issues. So I brought on a gentleman, an attorney that I've worked with in the past, Barry Finkel, and he goes through the whole process of helping people understand what it's like to get a divorce when you own a business.
Right. And we also have Laura Wasser from the West Coast. She's the co-founder of It's Over Easy, or itsovereasy.com. And she also has her own podcast called Divorce Sucks. And she talks a little bit about the potential issues that come up in a divorce related to business ownership and some options that business owners have, whether that's, one spouse is buying the other out, or if if a business broker is going to sell that business and divest of the proceeds between the two spouses. So another great interview, and also a fellow podcaster.
Yeah. And so I think we have some deals of the week and deal of the week and a listing of the week that deal with divorce as well. And, I'll just throw it out there that if you're trying to sell a business, and please tell your business broker that you're in the middle of a divorce or thinking about getting divorced. It certainly makes the transaction much more difficult when it's not out front.
Right. And Laura talks about this a little bit too, even if it's only one party that technically owns the business. In many states, a business is common property. So the business broker really has to know what's going on on the personal side of the transaction as well, because it is going to affect the final sale of the deal. And whether that spouse is involved in the business or not, they do have a say in how that transaction goes.
Yeah, not only do they have a say, but the attorneys that represent them have a say.
Right.
And most of the time, you cannot get a clear title to a business. Even if the spouse doesn't own it, there's enough onerous things that a spouse could do to a business owner to block the asset transfer or unwind things. So you certainly don't want to do that. So it's a great episode to listen to.
Right. And it's not necessarily everybody's most favorite topic or a fun topic, but I think it's very informative. And I think just like anything else, going into a situation with open eyes and understanding how it works and the process just empowers you more as a business owner if you are in a situation like this.
Great. Let's get to it.
Transworld Business Advisors is the world's largest business brokerage and mergers and acquisitions firm with over 500 brokers in nearly 200 offices worldwide. Transworld's team handles thousands of business sales every year. To be connected with a qualified business broker or learn more about the buying and selling process, visit tworld.com/the deal board or call 888-719-9098.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. And today, as you know, we're talking about divorce and how it relates to the sale of a business. I'm very excited to have a special guest with us today, Laura Wasser, who's a family law attorney with Wasser, Cooperman & Mandels, as well as the founder of It's Over Easy and the host of the Divorce Sucks podcast. Laura, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. And why don't you start by giving us a background about yourself and how you help couples going through a divorce, specifically as it's related to them owning a business together?
So I've been practicing family law in Southern California for 25 years now. The firm generally represents high-income, high-profile individuals. And in 2018, we launched It's Over Easy online divorce for people that didn't have $25,000 to pay for a retainer. And that enables people to kind of go online and work through the process on their own. In both instances, whether you're representing yourself in an uncontested online mediation or you're working with costly family law attorneys or anything in between, because there's lots of other ways of getting divorced these days, mediation, collaborative law, etc., you should know what the value of your business is, and again, that doesn't just have to do with after having a business valuation done, but what it actually means to you, both financially and emotionally. Generally, one person or the other will run the business, have control of that asset. Sometimes it's both people, but whether it's one or both, if the business was formed and worked on during the marriage, it falls under the laws of whichever state you live. In California, for example, it's community property, so that business is owned 50-50. In other states, that's equitable distribution, and that jurisdiction would talk about, what services were rendered during the marriage, what went into it, what kind of funds went into it, etc. So the couple should be doing a little bit of their own due diligence regarding the business itself, what it earns, whether money goes back into the business on either a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, or distributions are taken out by the owners. How many other owners are there? Are there contracts that govern the business, and how do those work? If you're thinking about selling the business, which can be a very, very clean way of disposing of an asset and splitting the proceeds, then you need to figure out what is going to be the most profitable way of doing it. Often when a couple is going through a divorce and they're going to sell the business, it's a good way of knowing nobody's going to sell the farm, to use the expression, without making sure that they're making the most profitable deal for themselves. So everybody's going to want to get garnish the highest price as possible so that they can split that. So that is a very clean and easy way of doing it. Sometimes it doesn't work out that simply.
That's definitely also what we see in our deals. And no matter what the deal is, it's never clean, but divorce always adds another layer that needs to be handled in the deal as well. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see happen to couples when they're trying to sell their business as a form of disposing of the asset?
With almost anything in divorce, the biggest mistakes come with a lack of communication, a lack of transparency, and a lack of, I won't say trust because it's not always a situation that engenders that much trust, but a lack of playing by the rules. And so I have seen situations where one party tries to do an end run and have somebody that they know buy the business, like a lowball price, and they can go back and buy it later or have it transferred later. Those things generally do not work out, and it's fraud. Another thing is because people are emotional, as with anything in a divorce proceeding, whether it's custody or support or the sale of a business, if people are not acting in a reasonable manner, they're acting in an emotional manner, things can go wrong. So sales have been blown based on one person thinking that it's not a high enough amount and really, really becoming emotional. That's why I said if this is something that's near and dear to you, often people treat their businesses like their babies. And if someone's coming in and saying, we need to sell this because if we don't have enough to support our family, or we need to sell this because the time is right, and you're kind of looking at all of these years of work that you've done to build up this business and also thinking, well, what am I going to do next month when the business is sold? This is where I would go every day. This was my identity. People can become very emotional, and so that can blow a sale. So those are big mistakes that people I've seen make when contemplating the sale, incident to a divorce.
Very true. All things that we've seen in our business as well, and very common situations. On the flip side, what advice would you give a couple that unfortunately is, going through a pending divorce and they're looking at the first steps of how to dispose of this business asset?
I would probably, if they both work in it together, I'd want to find out what level of knowledge they each had about what goes into the company each month and what comes out of the company each month. If they've got some kind of a, profit and loss statement, financial statements, look at those. And more important than me understanding them, that they understand them. Generally, there's going to be one partner that, handles the financial stuff and one partner is doing more of either the human resources or the creative side. So you want to get that other person up to speed. And often that can happen without, having both people lawyer up. You can have, as a mediator, both people figuring it out or having them sitting down and doing an informal kind of informational thing. Sometimes neither party is completely aware. So you could have, the chief financial officer, the chief operating officer come in and have a conversation, not a deposition, not recorded, not transcribed, but an informational meeting where whoever is in charge of whatever part of that company is talking and we're getting information about it so that it's all very transparent and there's a clear understanding of what's going on. I think that's super, super important as a building block to whatever else happens.
That's some great advice. And this entire show has just been full of helpful tips for business owners in this situation. Laura, if business owners want to contact you or receive resources or listen to your podcast, what is the best way for them to reach you?
So Wasser, Cooperman & Mandels is in Century City. We have a website. I'm Laura Wasser on Instagram, Laura Wasser Official. It's Over Easy is a website that has tons of content regarding all things that are divorce related. And part of that content is a link to the Divorce Sucks podcast that we do every week, where we speak to individuals in the field, if they're specialists in mental health or financial planning. Sometimes we'll have a celebrity on to tell us about his or her experience going through divorce, co-parenting, etc. It's Over Easy also has a full platform to go through the divorce process on your own, and it has a provider directory that we call the Index, which has professionals in the divorce field and many other areas, because we realize that just because you're divorced doesn't mean you don't need any more help. So if it's people rendering childcare services, finding new insurance, dating apps, where to sell your engagement ring, or where to get the best spray tan once you're out there dating again, they're all on the Index and it's Over Easy.
That's great. And we'll also drop those links into the show notes for our listeners if they want to get in touch with Laura. So Laura, thank you so much again for joining the show. And I hope this is helpful for our listeners.
It was my pleasure. Thank you too. Take care.
Hey, Andy, you know what time I think it is? I think it's time to talk about our deal of the week.
Deal of the week.
Welcome back, everybody. Today, our deal of the week comes from Al Fialkovich from our Transworld Denver office, and a deal that he closed last year in the industrial manufacturing industry that also involves a divorce. So, Al, thank you for coming back to the show and sharing this story with us.
Yeah, no problem, Jessica. Glad to be here.
So give us a quick overview about the deal and how the transaction went.
This was a husband and wife that were divorced, and they'd owned the business together for over 10 years. And the new wife worked in the business as well. So all three of them were leaving. So that created its own challenges in itself. But it was a very niche-y business that was in, as Jessica said, industrial manufacturing, which everyone loves manufacturing deals.
So our episode today is about divorce and how that can affect business sales. With the personal dynamics of the divorce, how did that change the deal or create additional challenges for you as a broker?
Well, it was a little challenging because the two of them really didn't talk. So that created its sort of own issue. And then everyone had their own things from stories or whatever from whatever happened in the past. But our job is to work for the client to get the best deal for them. And they each proposed to buy each other out, and that just wasn't an option for either of them because they all wanted to move on with their lives. So we were kind of like a therapist, as we like to say.
Great. So you ended up selling the company to a third party. So obviously they all got their proceeds afterwards. But was there any additional details on how the proceeds were split?
They had an agreement that it was a 50-50 split. They had an operating agreement. So everything went along those lines. We did an SBA deal. So a buyer came in that had a background in industrial manufacturing, says this was a perfect fit for them. And since then, they've grown the business tremendously, and they're doing a really good job with it.
So tell us the deal metrics. What did it sell for? What was the SDE? And then you already mentioned it was SBA finance, but was there any other financing structures in the deal?
So there was a little bit of seller carry, and the deal went for a little over 3 million. I think it was 3.25 million, and it did include the real estate. The STE was around 700,000 and growing. And we did a loan. I think the buyer put down around 750,000.
Great. Well, thanks again, Al, for sharing this deal story with us for the show today.
Thank you very much, Jessica. We'll see you soon.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. And we are talking about divorce. And unfortunately, that happens. And when people own a business, sometimes, they get divorced. And what happens when, a business owner or their partners, husband and wife, or the wife owns the business? And today I have a very special guest. I've had the good fortune of working with him in the past. Can't say on what, but I'll certainly say that I've had the good fortune of working with him. We have Barry Finkel from Finkel P.A, and he's been working as an attorney in this space for 35 years, and he's certainly an expert. And I enjoyed working with him because he was level-headed and got the deal done, much like the other professionals we love to work with in business. And so, Barry, welcome to the show. And why don't you give a little bit about yourself, and then, we could jump right in and talk about what it's like when divorce comes up when you're, owning a business.
Okay. Thanks, Andy, for having me. So we maintain offices in Fort Lauderdale and in Boca Raton. We handle all types of matrimonial cases in the Tri-County area. I've been doing this for 35 years, and I have very experienced associates and a wonderful staff. Doing divorce work as opposed to other types of legal work. The clients tend to rely on the individual lawyers. Many times you really don't see divorce lawyers as members of large firms, for a variety of reasons, but mostly from an economic standpoint, it really doesn't make sense for lawyers to be involved in large firms because the clients really want the individual themselves. So that's what we've been doing for 35 years. We only do divorce work, particularly for high net worth individuals.
That's great. So if somebody's getting divorced and they own a business, or they're, the spouse of someone who owns a business, what's kind of the first step? What's your advice?
Okay, well, generally, let's start off with the premise that all assets acquired during the marriage, regardless of how they are titled, are presumed to be marital assets. So a business owner who may own 100% of the stock of a corporation throughout their marriage does not offer any protection to that person, because even though the spouse, and let's just say for argument's sake, we're talking about a husband who owns the business and a wife who's making a claim for equitable distribution in a divorce case, that wife is going to have a claim to that business, even though it's not titled in her name, if that business was acquired during the marriage. And even if it wasn't acquired during the marriage, if it had appreciated and increased in value during the marriage, then that increase in appreciation could be marital. So the steps that you need to take is to value the interest of the owner spouse in a divorce case. And it is significantly different. I'm talking about the methodology of valuing the business interest. It's significantly different than it would be in a real world arm's length transaction between a real buyer and a real seller. If you'd like, I can go into it in a little more detail to explain why it's different.
Yeah, so it's fair value versus fair market value.
No, it is fair market value in a divorce case, and the premise of value is that the business is going to be valued as a going concern. But the difference is that in Florida, personal goodwill is not a marital asset. So really what we're talking about is the value of the business over and above its net asset value is goodwill. And then the question is that goodwill, that component of value in between the net asset value and the value of the business, what kind of goodwill is that? Is that personal or professional goodwill, which is a non-marital asset, or is it enterprise goodwill, which is a marital asset? One of the big tests that we use to determine that is, would a buyer require the seller to sign a non-compete? If a buyer is willing to pay more than net asset value, even if the seller is not willing to sign a non-compete, then you have that, then that at least that's an indication of enterprise value. But very rarely, of enterprise goodwill, but very rarely do you see a buyer say, I'm going to pay anything more than net asset value if the seller would not sign a non-compete. And if that's the case, then that signals that the goodwill is personal goodwill and it is not a marital asset. So, you know, in 90% of the cases, businesses are valued because of that reason. Businesses in divorce cases are valued in a net asset value approach.
Sure. And so that could be significantly less than what the business would actually trade for if the person signed a non-compete, which is par for the course for our deals.
Oh, sure. If I mean, what you do for a living and buying and sell businesses, you know, you deal with that all the time. But in a divorce case, because personal goodwill is not a marital asset, you have to exclude any value attributed to the non-compete.
Right. So, that's where it comes into, you know, you're going to need some good advice, because obviously if you're going to do some of these valuations, we all know valuations and art, not a science. I mean, there is some science behind it, but you know, you have to hire good people to kind of represent you.
We have some really, really fine business valuation experts in the divorce field. You know, so really what you're really trying to do is drill down into the real detail of the business. You know, how are the customers and the clients obtained? Are there personal relationships between the customers and the owners of the business? Are there contracts that can be terminated at will? You know, will the contracts be renewed if the seller is no longer part of the business? You know, these are the types of things you have to inquire about in order to really determine whether or not this is a net asset value approach, or there may be a capitalization of earnings. There's generally three ways to value a business in a divorce case. One is a net asset value approach, which, as you know, is assets minus liabilities.
Right.
Then there's capitalization of earnings, in which case we apply a cap rate to to either net income or cash flow, or in the event of a real estate business, net operating income. Or there is the market approach. If there are similar businesses that have been sold in the marketplace that you can use as a comparison. Right. Those are the three methods of valuing a business for divorce purposes in Florida. But like I said, most of the businesses are valued on a net asset value approach, because in very few situations will a buyer buy a business if the seller will not sign a non-compete, because of course, you know, he could go ahead and open a business right down the block, take all the customers. So no buyer is going to buy anything more than the value of the cash and the equipment and the receivables.
Right. And that's pretty much the case. So, you know, take it to the next step. So you have a dispute, you know, they're getting divorced. How often do you see one of the spouses or, you know, the husband in the case having to sell the business to satisfy the case? Or does, you know, is it usually paid out over time? You know, what's the kind of best case scenario?
Most likely, there is a principle in the law that says that it's not preferable for the court to keep the parties as partners in a business for obvious reasons. They can't get along in a marriage. They're not going to be able to get along as business partners. So generally, the business is awarded to one side, and let's say the business is worth $1 million. And let's say the court determines that that's the fair market value of the business. It's that goes on the side of the board for the husband. Now he owes the wife $500,000. If there are $500,000 of other assets that he would be able to give her, actually he would have to give her $1 million of equal assets. Then it's, you know, then we're square. Obviously, you have to tax effect. That's one of the big issues in the law, is that issue is not really settled. If the business is valued at $1 million and there are some embedded capital gains taxes in there, it's not really clear that that $1 million valuation is going to be tax affected. The law is really all over the place on that. You know, on one hand, you say if it's not going to be sold, then that tax liability is not going to arise. And that if it is going to be sold, tax rates could be different. There could be estate planning that could avoid tax rates. On the other hand, the whole premise is that there's a hypothetical sale. And if there's a hypothetical sale, then that tax liability, you know, would actually be real and would have to be paid. Unfortunately, that's not really settled. So that is an issue that we have. But a lot of times when people have businesses, there are other assets to offset the value of the business. And if not, then there are payments that are made with interest over time, usually secured by the business or some other assets. One of the problems that we have that also really needs to be clarified by the courts is the issue of double dipping. And by that, I mean, let's say you have a business that is being valued using the capitalization of earnings approach. So you have a business that has net income. That net income is used to pay alimony. It's also used to value the business. So you can see the double dip there. You know,
Right.
let's just say for our purposes, the wife is getting the value of the business based upon the cash flow of the business. But on the other hand, the husband now has to pay alimony based on the cash flow that he bought her out of. So there's a real double dip there, but that appears to be permissible under the law, at least in Florida.
And it does vary from state to state.
It does. You know, the divorce is a state by state issue, and Florida is, although it's a progressive state with regard to certain areas of the law, there are some areas that are unsettled. Like I said, the issue of double dipping, the issue of tax affecting assets, and things like that. And you know, and I know that today there was a bill that was presented to the House in Florida that essentially terminates permanent alimony. They've been trying to terminate.
Yeah, they've been trying that for a while.
For years. And today a bill was introduced, and I was about halfway through it when you called. But I do see that they are essentially eliminating permanent alimony and increasing the definition of a long-term marriage from 17 years to 20 years. And they're supposed to be introducing a companion bill in the Senate today as well. So we'll see where that goes. We'll see how the governor deals with that, because as you know, Governor Scott had vetoed the prior, I believe, 2 attempts to modify alimony.
Yeah. And I know that they've been working hard on that. And so that's a great summary of everything that we could kind of start with on this show. And maybe we'll call you back and get some more, but we're kind of running out of time. So how best to get in touch with you if somebody wanted to give you a call, Barry?
Anybody can call me at 954-776-1414.
Great. I really appreciate.
We are available, and if we're not here, we usually return calls within the hour. If we're busy or if we're not in the office, because this is a service business, and we want to make sure that our clients are happy and that we are responsive to their questions and their needs, 24/7.
Well, I could tell you right now that Barry and his staff are very responsive, and I've worked with them on a couple of cases. And thank you so much for coming on today. And I'm sure we'll be calling you again and talking some more legal issues. So thank you, Barry.
Anytime. I'm happy to help you, and thanks for giving me the opportunity, Andy.
Hey, Jessica, you know what time it is?
Money time?
Almost. It's time for listing of the week.
Hey, everybody. And today we have Simon Polzer from Transworld Business Advisors of Palm Beach. And he has, we were talking about today deals that involve divorce. And unfortunately, people call us when they have to list their business. And this is an example of it. So Simon, why don't you tell us a little bit about this listing?
Thanks, Andy. Yes, it's listed for $359,000. This is an established vitamin shop that's been around for over a quarter of a century. The $359,000 includes $65,000 of inventory, sellable inventory. The store was freshly reconfigured a couple of years ago, had an upgrade. They've got an advertising van. It's very turnkey. The seller's working about 35 hours a week. And unfortunately, divorce is forcing the sale. Full-time and a part-time employee. Very nice little business, very well-established and long-standing clientele.
And how much do you have financing on it yet?
No, we should be able to get SBA financing for this. Again, we have very clean books and records, and there's obviously a long history, so there should not be a problem getting SBA financing.
Okay, great. Sounds like a nice little deal for someone, established vitamin retail. And of course, that's continuing to be popular out there in the world. Simon, how best can someone get in touch with you?
They can reach me at 561-508-1160 or email me at spolzer, Polzer, at tworld.com.
Okay, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Andy. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in to our show today. If you like the podcast, don't forget to subscribe through your favorite podcasting app and leave us a review. If you have questions or suggestions for the show, visit us at tworld/thedealboard or email us at thedealboard@tworld.com.